In this video, we're going to be looking at methods. Methods is a really important part of coding. Sometimes they're called functions, other times they're called methods. Methods are a ordered procedure that is done repeatedly throughout a section of code. So it tells the computer a step-by-step method of doing something, performing a task which is done multiple times. So in computing, it's used when we repeat a whole lot of code. We don't want to write it out 5 or 6 times. We just write one method and then we call that method repeatedly. As a result, it reduces the amount of code and makes it an awful lot easier for other people to read through the code and understand what's actually going on. Methods are a really powerful thing in coding, and as you get more confident in your coding, you want to be writing more methods rather than just typing it out as one long string of code. So once you get a little bit more accomplished, methods are what you want to be writing. So let's look at methods, let's look at how they work and how they can save you an awful lot of time. So let's look at an example of going to school and getting your books for class. You go through a repeated process over and over and over again, and that's where something like a method becomes really powerful. So let's look at some examples. The first thing you need to do is you need to find your locker. Then you need to open your locker. Then you need to get the books out. Then you need to close your locker. Then you need to lock your locker. So it's a repeated task which goes over and over again. So this is perfect for our method. Let's look at how you might set that up for a method. So you write the word func, which means short for function. This is in Swift. In other languages, they do call it some other things like submethod or method. But for Swift, it's func. And then you give it a name. So we're going to call it getBooks. And then you'll see that it starts with 2 brackets, open and close. You can send variables to methods, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but at the moment we'll leave those variables blank. So it's just an open and close brackets, and then you open the curly bracket. And everything inside the curly brackets is executed every time that function is called. So what things do we want executed when we call the method getBooks? Well, the first one is undo the lock. So you've got to go through the process of undoing the lock. Open the door, select your books, get your pencil case, close the door, lock the locker, and then close the bracket, which means that all of that code will execute every time you call that method in your code. So that might happen multiple times a day. After each class, you go back, change your books over. So instead of writing it out 7 times per day, you just write out the one method and then it's one line of code to call that particular method. But we might want to add some complexity to it. We might want to go, look, we go to different classes. So it's going to be slightly different each time we get our books. So this time we're going to send a variable called class to our method. And when we do that, we write the method func getBooks, and then in the brackets we place the variable that's going to be received. So it would be class. This time we go through the same process, undo the lock, open the door, select our books, get our pencil case, and this time we have an if statement. If class is mathematics, then we get our calculator. We close that if statement off. If class is English, then we get our dictionary. We close that off. So this time we've got a method which has a few variations in it depending on the variable we send to that method. Then we close our door, lock our locker, and that's our method. So you can see how we've added some complexity to this method by sending a variable to it. We've added that complexity, which means that it can be more useful, particularly for something like getting books, when it depends on which class you're going to. So how might you call a method like this? In your code, you're going to have something like getBooks, brackets, mathematics. This calls the method getBooks and sends the variable, in this case it's a string, called mathematics as the class. So when this function is called getBooks, class is now equal to mathematics. If you did it where it was getBooks, brackets, English, class would be English. GetBooks brackets history, class would then become history. And everywhere in this section of code, variable class is now mathematics. So whenever we want to write if class equals this, it's going to be if mathematics equals this. So it's quite a powerful way to develop code and then simplify it down so it's much easier to read and much more effective. So methods are a really important part of coding, and the more you get used to building them into your code, the more powerful your code will be and the easier it is for someone else to understand it.